Greetings and salutations. This is Ia Owini. I will send you a D9 doodle see me, and I have not done a straight YouTube video in a while. And so today, y'all get an astrology video, sort of an astrology video. So I decided to do this because this young lady I follow on TikTok, and I can't recall her name right now. Oh, Professor Darling, who does astrology, and she reminded me that Mars is going to be conjunct the North Node. And so she was talking about all the beautiful things that the moon is doing, good things. And then she said, Mars conjunct the North Node, not good. And so we know Mars being the planet of conflict and war and all of these things, but it's also so much more than that. So I decided to take a look at not just that particular transit, but what is happening simultaneously. So I picked out a couple of things. So I picked out Saturn and Neptune making their conjunction. I did Mars making a conjunction to the North Node, and then I did Jupiter, who just stationed direct. All of this is happening at the same time. And so, yes, there are other transits taking place. Mercury is retrograde, and all those things are well and good. But I only had enough energy to do a few things, and this is what I chose. So, I am going to talk about this in both a Western and through the lens of EFI. So, you'll hear me use language that's very much Western, traditional, modern, and modern astrology. And then you'll hear me talk about what this looks like through.
You're going robotic.
Like Ifa is wisdom, period. It's not just wisdom of plants and animals and trees and grass. It is wisdom, period. The system itself is the divination system. The spiritual practices associated with it, specifically Isheshe, are not simply religion, they are spiritual science. And our ancestors were looking at the stars before anyone else. And so, though we do not know what names they called certain planets and things of that nature, we do know they were tracking the movements. We do know they were tracking the constellations. One second, let me do 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 see if, and I don't know. So hold on, because my students are sitting in the studio audience. So is it robotic for everybody?
You're clear now. It was just a second where
Okay.
you went robotic.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So the transit I'm going to start with is going to be, after my laptop stops, is going to be Neptune conjunct Saturn. I have a lot of notes, that I took and got some organizing on. And then as I was working on putting all of my notes together, I got some additional like query questions from ChatGPT to kind of like even draw out some additional thought. So, do 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 do. So Neptune and Saturn. So Neptune and Saturn are making what is called a conjunction. Essentially, they're sitting right next to each other. They're all nice and cozy. They're cozy in the cosmos. They're sitting right beside each other. They can reach out and touch each other's hands. They're just sitting in close proximity. When they're making a conjunction, or when planets are making a conjunction, they are working together harmoniously. They're not fighting over whose energy should be most present. The energy is just coalescing in a way where they're just, you could tell both energies are present. So, what does Neptune represent? Neptune is dreams, mysticism, psychic awareness. It is collective consciousness. It is illusion versus divine inspiration, and it is a dissolving of boundaries. When you look at the planet Neptune, you can see it's got, you know, a boundary and yet not. So energetically, it manifests in that same way. Saturn. So we have Saturn, which is structure, it's law, it's responsibility, It's discipline. There you go. Go back up. There you go. Structure, law, discipline, long-term building, authority, institutions, and reality checks. Now, this is not an all-inclusive list. I'm sure there's probably other descriptions that can go for them. That's where my list stops today. So, when these two meet, there are two questions that tend to come up. What dream deserves structure, and what illusion needs to dissolve? What dream deserves structure, and what illusion needs to dissolve? So the energy often shows up as like spiritual realism. There's no fantasy spirituality, and there's also no rigid materialism, but the demand to build something sacred that actually works is what will actually work. These two are making this conjunction in the sign of Aries. So the sign that the planet is in is kind of like the lens or the frequency, the lens or the frequency those planets are colored under. So in this case, they're in Aries, and Aries is the spark. It is the first step. It is the warrior. It's the pioneer. It is the individual will. So instead of Neptune drifting off into imagination and being all high and hippie, it's Aries is pushing that energy towards taking action. But with Saturn being present, it is saying, yes, do take an action, but it needs to be with intention. This is not a chaotic rebellion. It's a disciplined initiation. So some of the themes that this transit might be bringing about. So structured spiritual awakening. When I saw this, and I saw it in Aries, Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. So all things come with being the first. It is the first, so it's a starter. It's a cardinal energy. It's a leader, but it's also the youngest of the zodiac. So it can be impulsive, it can be reckless, and it can be immature. It can be childlike. So when I looked at this, I said, there are a lot of young people waking up, but they're waking up in a way that is also allowing them to be spiritually grounded. Like they are waking up, but there's something very grounded, very intentional, and very organized about how they're waking up. So how do I do this is one of the questions that they may be asking. Like, how do this is happening. So what do I do with it? What does this look like in real life? This is not like, okay, I'm spiritual and I just got a bunch of crystals and all these things. People who are waking up now or going through another awakening are saying, how does me having a spiritual practice support me in real life? And how do I build something sustainable from it? So this is where, and for those of you who have heard it, I did that podcast episode, and the question I said, do you have a spiritual practice? Are you spiritual? Do you have a spiritual practice? Or do you live a spiritual lifestyle? And so this is a transit that is saying spirituality is going from aesthetic, where you look the part, to practice, where you live the part. So that was one of the things. The other thing I looked at was building new systems of consciousness. Neptune dissolves old beliefs, but Saturn builds a new container. So in Aries, this would look like new spiritual movements, new leadership styles, new philosophies on identity and autonomy, and younger people become teachers or guides. So Aries rules youth and emergence. So that's why it'd be looking at that way. Number 3 is a reality check on spiritual fantasies. So Saturn asks, is this real or are you just projecting? And so this may expose fake gurus, spiritual bypassing, any conspiracy fog, and belief systems that lack grounding. So anything built purely in the illusion of Neptune struggles under Saturn's scrutiny. So thinking about from a spiritual perspective, things that you have been seeing, conversations that have been had around spiritual practices and things of that nature, and where questions are being asked and shifts are being called to be made. So, number 4 was courage. Courage to live your vision. Aries demands embodiment. So instead of just believing something spiritually, a lot of times we feel compelled to live it. So this would be things like spontaneously leaving careers, starting doing healing work, creating communities, redefining what leadership looks like. But then Saturn adds this rule to it. It's like, if you start this thing, you are responsible for it. If you start this thing, you are the one that's going to be responsible for what you are building. So when I was working on this and kind of like working through the things, one of the suggested sentences that was given that might highlight this is dreams are being asked to grow bones, and or vision is being tested for endurance. One moment. Sorry, phone rang. Um, Also understanding that with Saturn and Neptune together, it's not just Saturn asking for structure, but if the structure isn't aligned, if the structure doesn't have stability, if the structure is old and dated, a lot of times when I think about Saturn, I think about Chronos, because I think that's Saturn's parallel in terms of the Greek and Roman gods. And so Cronus is the keeper of time. And so a lot of times Saturn, where Saturn seems to be rigid, it's because Saturn is looking at timing. Like, is this happening at the right time? And or has this thing outlived its usefulness? And so with it being conjunct Saturn, is like, to conjunct Neptune, this is a question: has something outlived its usefulness? Is something in place that does not hold up to scrutiny? So we may also see institutions losing credibility, authority figures being exposed, systems people once trusted are now dissolving, because Neptune also says not everything that appears solid is actually real. So this conjunction is both building the new and dissolving the false old. With Aries being associated with our will, this transit is also asking, is your will aligned to something sacred? Or are you acting from ego's illusion? And Saturn is going to test you in that. So what vision are you willing to take responsibility for? Not dream about it, not just talk about it, but what vision are you willing to build? What vision are you willing to build? So a quick summary of some of this energy is new awakenings emerging, younger voices stepping forward, visionary ideas appearing, Saturn asking for discipline and longevity, and not rushing in impulsively. Also, illusions being exposed, institutions dissolving, and spirituality moving from aesthetic to practice. So this is where the invisible becomes visible, but only through discipline and sacrifice. It's where the invisible becomes visible only through sacrifice. So this is what this transit looks like from a westernized lens. So for my students who are sitting in the audience, if you have questions, drop them in the comments. I'm going to move on to some highlights about what I saw from an E5 lens. So this is the meeting of ocean and earth. So Neptune is ocean, depth and mystery. Saturn is earth, structure and foundation. And so when we meet, we get the depth of the ocean touching the firmness of the earth. And this is not the water on the surface. This is the deep water, meaning land. This is right before I did this, Aluo sent me a video from YouTube that showed some Oyinbo messing with an oarfish. So emojis for those who know what an oarfish is. Or rather, emojis for those who don't know what an oarfish is. That's probably a more accurate question. Does everybody know what an oarfish is? Okay, cool. Y'all do. Okay, great. So, oarfish. The nickname for the oarfish is the doomsday fish. And so in the video, you have two of them have washed on the shore of this beach. And you have these three Oyinbo women, and they are like, oh my God, what is this? And so the first are just looking at it, all the things, and one of them is like, it's still alive. We need to get it back in the water, which I inherently don't have a huge problem with. But it was like, the things with them touching the things and all of that. So I digress. So there's going to be something about this oarfish that comes forward. So the oarfish is said to only come up on the surface if it has transitioned. So, but these oarfish were still alive, and they typically say if the oarfish is seen, you know, it's not a good thing because they're so down at the bottom of the ocean and they're so old. We shouldn't see them. They are something that we are not supposed to be able to lay our eyes on them. We know they exist, but we ain't supposed to be able to see them like that, not at the surface. So we have this deep fish coming to shore. Deep sea creatures represent mysteries from the unseen world, knowledge from hidden depths, and things that are rarely seen. So when something from the deep rises, people panic, which is why the fish is called the doomsday fish. The fish is just out here trying to be a fish. He's like, I'm just out here being a fish. I can't help it that I'm old and I don't talk to you people. Why I gotta be all that? Why I gotta be a doomsday fish? But that's what happens when people see something they've never seen before. They immediately give it a negative connotation, i.e., this is why they call it a doomsday fish. But often what we're seeing is something ancient becoming visible. This is Neptune meeting Saturn. So when we think about mysteries from the deep, in an E5 lens, this is hidden wisdom becoming practical knowledge. So down in the realm of Neptune, we have sunken ships, lost treasure, ancient things still alive, but below the surface. And the Orisha associated with Neptune, those who know will know. I don't even have to say, like, those who know understand once I gave that symbolism who I'm referring to. And so a lot of times that energy is also associated with abundance, but this is not just like your average everyday abundance. This is generational abundance. This is generational abundance. And so this is not just for the moment. This is abundance that is supposed to impact generations going forward. And also understanding generational abundance is not just money. Money is included, yes, but it's also wisdom, it's lineage, it's children, it's health, it's spiritual alignment and community stability. So, what ancient wisdom is rising, and who is prepared to handle the wisdom correctly? This is where Saturn comes in, because Saturn comes in and says, can you carry the responsibility of the mystery? So, the divinity that is associated with Saturn is perceived as ugly, diseased, frightening, but is also responsible for healing. Again, based upon my description, those who know will know exactly which Odisha I'm talking about. And so this strongly reflects the archetype of transformative healing through what society fears or misunderstands. And so that disease, contamination, confusion, because Neptune does also talk about diseases. And even when you think about, one of the things I thought about with them touching the oarfish is like, you don't know what the oarfish has, and the oarfish don't know what you have. Why are you touching it with your bare hands? Where is your towel? to protect the fish so it don't take some crazy germs back down to its brethren in the ocean. Why you touching stuff? So even with the invite of diseases and things, there always comes with it medicine. It comes with medicine. It comes, so contamination comes with cleansing, and confusion comes with knowledge. So the same force that causes illness can also cure it. So, like an inoculation, a small controlled exposure creates protection and immunity. So, the lesson here, when we look at this, is like, what lesson, what are we learning? Do we understand the medicine hidden inside the mystery that's being revealed, or do we reject it because we misunderstand it? So, spiritual health as collective wellness. Spiritual health is important. This transit isn't asking people to simply believe spiritual ideas. It is asking, how does spirituality produce real wellness? Wellness of the body, wellness of the mind, wellness of the community, wellness in our environment, and wellness that is going to impact future generations. It is the idea that alignment with destiny produces prosperity, not just material prosperity, but balanced living. Now, the energy where these two embodiments are landing is the frequency of Ogundameji. So Ogundameji is the creator. So this is the energetic expression that is happening. So Ogundameji carries themes of creation, forging, innovation, transformation through action, clearing of obstacles, etc. Ogundameji's energy often emerges when something new must be built, sometimes completely new. Sometimes we're breaking apart an old structure to build something new on top of it. So again, this goes back to that Saturn being structure and Neptune being dissolving of the structure. So together, there's like, break what is false and build what is true. Break what is false and build what is true. This is innovation with responsibility. Ogunda is not just raw masculine force. It is directed masculine force. So the question here becomes, how do we innovate without destroying the balance? How do we innovate without destroying the balance? And this is about moderation and the use of resources. So because innovation without wisdom leads to environmental damage, social instability, and technological chaos. But innovation guided by wisdom creates progress, healing, and new systems. So mysteries being revealed. Is it healing or creating conflict? So when hidden knowledge surfaces, two things can happen. It can either restore balance or create conflict, because revelation disrupts existing power structures. So the question here is, do we have the discernment to understand what is being revealed? And the mystery should not be weaponized, but we know sometimes they are. So sometimes we see people and they get these mysteries and they allow themselves to, like, okay, let's see how this can help support the community. How can this be used to heal the community? The other is, some people will take that mystery and weaponize it and use that mystery to create fear and division. We also see the clearing of obstacles through this revelation. So Ogunda is often about cutting through obstacles, forging something new, and removing blockages. So the revelation itself can function as the tool that clears the path. When truth is revealed, false authority collapses, hidden knowledge returns, and communities gain clarity. That clarity becomes the axe or the machete that cuts the road forward. So the core question of this transit through an E5 lens then becomes, when mysteries rise from the deep, will we use them to heal or use them to harm? Because the knowledge itself is neutral. What matters is perception, discipline, intention, and responsibility. Saturn demands maturity. Neptune reveals the unseen, and Aries asks us to act. So this could be summarized as ancient mysteries are rising to the surface again. The question is whether we have the wisdom to use them for healing rather than conflict. Another way this could be looked at is revelation clears obstacles, but only if we understand what we are seeing. So, in this, the question that was asked of me is whether this is an individual manifestation or if this is a collective message. Is this happening individually or collectively? And I said it kind of depends on where it falls. In my own birth chart, I can see this very personally, simply because of where it's landing in my chart. I won't interpret my placement, but I will tell you that it is sitting in my 10th house, which is the house of my legacy. The 10th house is the house of your legacy. So this is sitting in the house of what I will be known for, my public reputation, my career, the long-term vision of my career. That's where this is landing at for me. So it does feel extremely personal. But Neptune and Saturn, even though Saturn is it's the furthest personal planet away from us, but Neptune is not a personal planet. It is a transpersonal planet. It is a collective body planet. And Saturn is kind of like borderline personal and collective body. So I can see, depending on how this lands, this feeling very personal, but I can also see where you can see these messages and see collectively how this energy is moving, even if you can't understand it from a personal perspective. You can see it on a collective perspective. So one of the questions that I was asked is, did it feel like ancient wisdom returning or hidden problems finally surfacing? And I said it was both. I said it's both. This is ancient wisdom returning and hidden problems also finally surfacing. And I said it's not even that the problems were really hidden, it's more that the problems were ignored. Like a lot of ignored problems, a lot of problems that people knew existed but didn't really want to look at, or problems that people were kind of like cognitive dissonance was active. My mother and I were having a conversation, and one of the things that we were talking about was something that was in some of these files. And I told her I was sadly surprised by some of the people, but not surprised about what they allegedly did. And I said, they're just operating like their ancestors. And she's like, she said I had said this before. She's like, what do you mean? And I said, there are some people right now, there are Oyinbo in our country right now whose furniture is made out of our ancestors. We were told George Washington's teeth was wood. We now know that was a lie. This is not new information. We know what they did to Nat Turner. This is sadly old information becoming visible. So this brought about the concept of, in terms of the transits, the illness and the cure rising together. So the mystery rising from the deep is not only wisdom, illness is also rising with it. And when something ancient rises to the surface, two things come with it: the problem that has long been ignored and the medicine that was buried with it. Both will emerge at the same time, but people don't always recognize both. Most people only see one. So we have the oarfish versus doomsday fish. The fish is simply an oarfish, but they don't understand it, so they call it a doomsday fish. And it's also named by a particular group of people. And I want to say this intentionally in this moment, that when you look at how some people visualize the future, like Japan is living in the future now. Japan, all they need is flying cars. Japan is living in the future now. That is the future they visualize. When we talk about Wakanda, that's what Kirby said. I seen a future and Wakanda ain't a movie. That's the future we visualize. But then we have some people who visualize Mad Max as the future. Why the difference? Really, that's something to think about. Why the difference? And why is it every time they think about these things, it's always in a doomsday lens? So this nickname for this fish, doomsday fish, doesn't surprise me, because it's like some groups of people are just adamant in looking for a doomsday scenario, and they won't be happy until they create it for themselves. So we got this fish, and it's like it's just a fish. It's not about the fish. The fish is just an innocent bystander. It's not about the fish itself. It comes from our interpretation of what we're seeing. This is the kind of moment Neptune Saturn creates. Something rises from the depth that has always existed, but because it has been hidden for so long, people project meaning on it. Some people see doom, danger, collapse. Others see information, wisdom, and revelation. But the phenomenon itself is just itself. Cognitive dissonance breaking. Many of the things surfacing right now are actually not new problems. They are long-standing problems that people refuse to look at. Things that were ignored, rationalized, normalized, hidden under spiritual language, or hidden under institutional authority. Neptune dissolves the veil. Saturn says, you cannot pretend this isn't happening anymore. So what rises feels shocking, but in reality, it has been present for a very long time. The ancestral medicine. The medicine is rising with the illness. The same deep ocean that hides problems also contains ancestral knowledge. That knowledge might come through elders, tradition, forgotten practices, spiritual insight, and community wisdom. So while the illness becomes visible, the question becomes, who is listening for the medicine at the same time? Because many people only focus on the problem, but the solution is also emerging. Spiritual discipline required. The real challenge of this moment is, can you witness the illness without becoming the illness? That is the discipline. If someone sees corruption, conflict, or imbalance, there are two reactions available. They can absorb the sickness, become angry, bitter, reactive, or embody the healer, recognizing the imbalance while remaining grounded enough to help restore wellness. That requires spiritual maturity. The healer is not someone who pretends illness does not exist. The healer sees it clearly, but they do not internalize it. They remain stable enough to say, yes, there is sickness here. Yes, there is imbalance here. Now, what restores harmony? This is about recognizing the problem as the first step toward giving sacrifice and having restoration. You cannot heal something you refuse to see, but seeing it does not mean being consumed by it. So the collective question for this moment seems, when illness becomes visible, who chooses to become the medicine? Because the exposure alone does not restore balance. Exposure simply reveals the imbalance. Healing requires people to remain calm, listen to ancestral wisdom, apply the remedy. A question here is, are you able to hear both the illness and cure simultaneously? Because people often become stuck on one side. Some people obsess over the illness. Others ignore the illness and only talk about positivity. But true healing requires holding both realities at once. And can you witness the illness without contracting it? That is the spiritual test, because emotional and spiritual illnesses can spread the same way physical ones do. Fear spreads, anger spreads, conflict spreads, but so does wisdom, so does calm, and so does clarity. So a summary might be, ancient problems are surfacing, but so is ancestral medicine. The question is whether we can recognize both without being consumed by the illness. So the question that I was asked was, do I feel like this is about exposure of truth or the responsibility of leadership once truth is exposed? So that's the first transit that I got. That's the first transit I got. So the next one will be Mars making the conjunction to the North Node in Pisces. And let's see. You know what? I think I could do this one in 15 minutes. So, this is my Western lens. The compulsion of destiny. North Node in traditional astrology is not just here's your purpose. It is more like here's the direction evolution is dragging you to, whether you like it or not. It's a compulsion. It is a magnetic pull. I must go this way. People often feel restless, redirected, pushed out of familiar structures, unable to go back to their old life. So when Mars, the planet of action, conflict, courage, and movement, sits on that point, it activates the magnet. It becomes destiny in motion. Mars in Pisces is action in the realm of spirit. So we have Mars is normally very direct. Fight, move, build, conquer. But Pisces is not direct. Pisces moves through intuition, emotion, dreams, spiritual knowing, compassion, and imagination. So Mars in Pisces often feels like action guided by intuition rather than strategy. Or sometimes it feels like confusion about what action to take because emotions are overwhelming the signal. So the question becomes, can people trust their spiritual intuition enough to act on it? Why this transit feels emotional. Pisces is what? Water holds grief, memory, and dreams. When Mars activates in that space, emotions that were hidden often flood to the surface, and people feel spiritually restless, emotionally raw, and suddenly aware of truths that they ignored. And Mars forces that movement. So, about the spiritual awakening happening for many people right now, this is very much aligned to this transit because Neptune rules Pisces and Mars rules Aries. So we have Pisces, which dissolves old identity structures. People start asking, who am I really? What do I believe? Why have I been living this way? But Mars, now Mars adds urgency. So instead of quietly reflecting, people feel pushed to act on their realization, sometimes constructively, sometimes chaotically. The hidden enemy within. So Pisces is the natural ruler of the 12th house. So the 12th house deals with hidden enemies, unconscious behavior, self-sabotage, institutions, and collective suffering. These themes are present with Pisces, whether Pisces is in the 12th house or not. Mars lighting this area up often reveals adversaries that were previously hidden, patterns of self-betrayal, and systems working against people's well-being. And the hardest realization sometimes is, are you willing to see that you might be your own enemy? So in doing this, I was thinking about Black women being displaced. Uh, Ia Jacoja and I were having this conversation, and I said, the 500,000 Black women who have since lost their jobs, left their jobs, whatever the case may be, and are still looking for employment. It is purposeful on two sides. It is institutionally purposeful, and I firmly believe it's spiritually purposeful. The illness and the cure. I'm curious, the ones went back to work successfully, were they doing the work that they were supposed to be doing? And the rest of them, are you trying to go back to what you know versus going to what you need to be in this life? So the Mars, Mars plus a North Node can manifest as forced redirection. Mars in the North Node can act as forced redirection. People who were comfortable in a certain structure suddenly find doors closing, institutions shifting, and their role is no longer sustainable. From a purely social perspective, that is painful and disruptive. Spiritually, it can represent destiny pulling someone away from something misaligned, not because the person failed, but because the path must change. And Pisces often pushes people toward healing work, spiritual leadership, creativity, community care, artistic expression, compassionate service. So the system that once employed someone may literally stop supporting them. The soul's direction changes. Mars awakening creative visibility. So I thought it was very interesting that people were talking about no one cares about ballet or opera. And I'm like, who don't care? Who said that? So, but what happened is he made that comment, and all of a sudden, especially we see all these new ballerinas posting content, opera singers posting content, people who play all these creatives posting content, and heavy on seeing like black men ballerinas on my feed. It's outstanding. But would this have happened had that young man not made that comment and created that conflict? Mars activates visibility. Pisces rules arts, music, performance, and spiritual expression. So when conflict appears, i.e., nobody cares about this thing, then the artists step forward and say, here we are. Mars turns passive creativity into assertive expression. So Mars and Pisces can also heighten intuitive sensitivity, dreams, psychic awareness, emotional perception. But the danger here is misinterpretation, because Pisces blurs boundaries. People may feel deeply intuitive but struggle to discern true guidance, projection, and emotional reaction, which is why grounding practices become very important during this time. So the core question of this particular transit is, will you act on what your soul knows or continue living the life you were taught to live? Because Mars sitting on a North Node creates pressure. I cannot keep pretending I don't know what I know. So we have Neptune and Saturn in Aries. And then we have Mars, which is Aries ruler, activating Pisces. So the mysteries are surfacing with Saturn and Neptune. Truths are becoming visible. And now Mars conjunct the North Node, action is required. So now that you see the truth, what are you going to do about it? And when your spirit recognizes its true path, hesitation becomes impossible. Destiny becomes louder than fear. Destiny becomes louder than fear. So I'm going to pause there. And I'm going to do a part two. This is going to be a 2-part video. I thought I could get it done in an hour, but I can't. So I'm going to do a part two. But while I have a few minutes before my next class calls, I'm going to go look in the comments and see what questions came up. So for the person who asked me about the Orisha that was ugly and is both the illness and the cure, yes, you're correct. Is Ogunameji the Eton about Ogun and Yemoja? Yes, it is. And in part two, I actually touch on that symbolism as well. It is the one where you are reminded where Ogun's strength comes from. You're reminded where Ogun's strength comes from. So before I stop this particular part and prepare for class, and then I report part two later, anybody not be able to ask their question that has a question? Fantastic, sensational. So if you listen to this all the way at the end, I sincerely hope that you have hit the subscribe and boop, 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 and the notification bell so that you know when I get part two uploaded. Just in case I don't upload both of these at the same time, make sure if you want to know for yourself how this is personally impacting you, you can look at your birth chart. Yes, you do need your birth time, but you can go look at your birth chart and see which house this is landing in. Which houses is landing in, because that's the area of your life that you're being called to witness and to act in. You're called to bear witness and make some decisions in one area, and the other area is how you're going to take action on those decisions. So take a look to see where are Pisces and Aries in your chart. For those of my students, look to see where Ogunda and Otsura are happening in the chart. And so part two, we will talk about some more about this from a Western lens for the Mars North Node. We will discuss what this looks like through an E5 lens. And then we're going to also talk about Jupiter stationing direct in Cancer, or the witness of our destiny sitting in Eros Sumeji. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Odabo.